Welcome to the 349th edition of Outside the Box. At the moment of recording, it's May 19th, 2015. Coming to you from sunny southern Colorado. And I've made the decision to continue the Access show because the world events that are taking place need to be discussed, need to be reported on, need to be talked about in the proper context. And there is great value in Access Community Television. There's great value in using the internet, in using technology for positive purposes in a world where there are so many misuses of technology. So thank you for tuning in to this broadcast of Outside the Box. There's going to be a lot more reporting from me to you in the coming weeks. This is the first on-the-road news show that I can recall in years. In fact, I don't know that I've actually ever done a remote show covering current events, showing graphics, talking about what's going on outside of the Portland, Oregon studio. So this is actually a pretty big event for me. It's now been about a month since I've left the Portland area. I'm resting now in southern Colorado, not too far from Trinidad, Colorado, and Walsenburg, Colorado. Beautiful part of the country. And I believe that as human beings, we need to travel. We need to have a connection to nature. We need to maintain a sense of freedom in our own lives, to maintain a basic sense of sanity in a world that is starting to appear more and more insane. So I am grateful. I am grateful that I am in the position that I'm in, and I'm learning a lot from my experiences. Never sell yourself short on what you're capable of or in terms of what is possible. You know, you may think that reality is fixed in your own life, that your own life is limited, that you yourself are limited in terms of your abilities, your gifts, or what you might be able to manifest for yourself. And it is until you're willing to believe and go for it with everything that you've got that you see what you're really capable of doing or escaping, manifesting, creating, destroying. There's things worth creating in this universe, and I would say there are certain systems of control and wickedness, of deception, that are worth destroying. Be very mindful as to where you let your thoughts go. The goal for both you and I is to survive the ongoing social, spiritual zombie apocalypse that is infecting so many of our peers. Take a look at the news. Be aware of what the headlines are actually telling us about human consciousness. And as we look into the abyss, as we look into the eye of Sauron, if you will, let us not become lost by our own fears of what may happen to our flesh. Whatever is taking place, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, new viewers and old, it is big. And there is a much bigger picture than the reality that many people are looking at in today's day and age, looking at reality through the lens of a McDonald's straw. Blaming this group and that group, this race and that nation, this gender, this state, this county, this political group, this fad, the younger generation, the older generation. It's getting really insane. Be aware of it, but don't become consumed by it. And how do we use this information around us to help us evolve to becoming better people? So there's going to be a number of things that we're going to be talking about. It is May 19th on a Tuesday in the year 2015. At the moment, it's 2:27 in the afternoon. And this morning, there was a geomagnetic storm. Now, it's normal for there to be more solar flares in 2015. The latest projections from NASA, this is the tail end of the double peak of this solar cycle, sunspot cycle number 24, and we look at world events. And as I've talked about before, and we see these protests increasing, we see police getting shot, we see police killing people, we see the media feeding on this information, pouring gasoline on the fire. We see increased tensions in the South China Sea. We see increase in wars throughout the world, Yemen, Middle East. We see ISIS being struck by these planes, these drones. We see all these manufactured events in the news. We're about to get into some things in just a little bit. Be able to connect the dots for yourself. You can go to spaceweather.com, sign up for their email updates. When something big is taking place, like an X-class solar flare, you'll know about it. And then you can go to the Google News feed and see what's taking place. You can go to your favorite alternative media website or just look at the mainstream media and take a look at what is going on, but also what they want you to focus on. Look at the manufactured events, the false flags. Look at the drills that take place. But pay attention, first and foremost, to how you may be reacting to the solar flares. A rise in anxiety, a rise in insomnia, a rise in aggressive, knee-jerk, reactionary behavior. Take a look at your thoughts, examine them, become aware of them, and learn how to not be controlled by your emotions. Placing extra emphasis on breathing, deep breathing, observing your breath, being aware of current events, but not being controlled emotionally, not having an automatic emotional response to things that we should be aware of on a moment-to-moment basis. And what I'm doing now is making sure that both computers are on as I do this remote broadcast from the comfort of my RV. So having basically given an introduction and let you know that there is ongoing solar flare activity, a recent geomagnetic storm, be aware of the things that are taking place on the planet. And there's a lot of concern and buzz concerning volcanic activity, in particular the Ring of Fire. So we are going to get into that. So let me share with you this headline. And by the way, all the headlines that I'm about to share with you, I have personally posted to amtvmedia.com. So you can go to that website, click on the news tab. You can also subscribe to the RSS feeds. There's the Twitter page. There's the Facebook page. That way, if you're online on a regular basis, when I'm posting news for this website, you can be updated right away with what I'm seeing. So this is basically a collection of different headlines that I've been posting to this website over the course of, say, the last week or so. Urban unrest expert Dr. Max Herman says that the United States is on the cusp of a wave of domestic disorder and that the country will see more race riots. He sees the reemergence of a 60s-style protest ideology amongst black communities, not just blacks but whites as well, Hispanics included, and others, which will lead to more disorder. He says, quote, "It's clear from studying history that these things tend to run in cycles. I think that we are at the cusp of another cycle." And as I just said, and as I've been talking about for multiple years, there's a connection between solar flares and large protests. When people are all of a sudden, they're feeling it. They're feeling that revolutionary spirit. So there's a reason why even in 1992, during that solar cycle, we saw a major event. It was the LA riots. All that angst that was already there for years prior, all of a sudden, at that moment, erupted. Even though there's police brutality, there are incidents all throughout the solar cycle. It's usually when it's at the solar maximum portion, I've noticed that people are reacting. Not just police brutality, but protests against other things taking place in the world. There's less apathy in general during the solar maximum period. So we see more things in the news. Big events, big fights. 9 dead, 192 arrested in a major biker gang war, gang fight in Waco, Texas. And it's the top story on the planet. People love stuff like this, though. They love their gangster movies. They love their biker movies. They're not calling these people terrorists, of course. And by the way, 4 of the dead were killed by police. So it's a media frenzy. Not to mention 49 dead, I believe, in Chicago over a period of a couple of days. I've mentioned before connections between drive-by shootings and solar flares. And in addition, a really tragic story out of, I think, South Texas. 15 gunmen connected to the Mexican cartels invaded a house, the wrong house. They're going after somebody else. They end up in the wrong house. And they shot a mother and son. Fortunately, the mother and son have survived. But I notice a lot of stuff like this in the news within days or weeks of solar flares and subsequent geomagnetic storms. Now, in terms of Earth changes, one of the top stories on the planet right now, 40 volcanoes are erupting, and only 6 of them are not along the Ring of Fire. Where's Portland, Oregon? Portland, Oregon is in the Ring of Fire. So we've seen an increase and also awareness that there are more earthquakes, there are more earth changes, there are more tsunamis. Of course, there's debate as to what's causing it. Is it some secret government technology? There is a connection with the solar flares. There is a connection with the Earth's weakening magnetic field. There is a connection with magnetic north moving. Something is taking place on our planet, and there are many people that are asking the ultimate question, what is going on? And there's a lot of things taking place. There's Jade Helm 15, concerns about martial law drills. There's the geopolitical tensions, U.S. and Russia, U.S. and China, people wondering what's going to happen next. More and more Middle Eastern countries being invaded and bombed every day, all these new weapons being developed, and people wondering when is it actually going to hit the fan. And I'm not here on this show making predictions, although there's a lot of predictions about September 2015. I would suggest people be prepared, but not be fanatic about it. Okay, whether you're going to be in the city or whether you're going to be in the country or whatever your plans are, be prepared, but understand that a lot of the TV shows that you've seen, Doomsday Preppers and whatnot, have taken certain fringe folks and try to make it look kind of like a weird, kook-like thing. There's nothing kooky about having a connection to your water, about having a basic food supply, about having an off-the-grid location, about not having all your eggs in one basket. It's being an intelligent man. It's being an intelligent woman. And I think that a lot of you are capable. I've seen what I've been able to manifest and do with very little, simply from willpower alone. Willpower should not be underestimated. It should instead be used mindfully in the right way. There are many people that apply their willpower towards staying in victim consciousness, and I advocate against that. I think that we should apply our willpower, our intent, our focus towards manifesting that freedom that each and every one of us truly deserves. But it requires work, and it doesn't come easy. So we talked about all these volcanic eruptions. For years, there's been concerns about the next big one hitting the Portland, Oregon area, for example, and the devastation that it would cause. And they seem to be discovering more and more fault lines in that part of the planet and other parts of the planet every single day. But here's something that came out several weeks ago. An underwater volcano off the coast of Oregon has risen from its slumber and may be spewing out lava about a mile beneath the sea. Researchers were alerted the possibility, and that was also a solar maximum time period. So we saw volcanic activity then in 1980 during that solar flare cycle. Here we are 35 years later, several solar flare cycles later, and we have massive awareness about the volcanic activity, also increased activity at Yellowstone being detected in the western part of Idaho and also in parts of Montana. So these are really big headlines, along with this recent one about the underwater volcano erupting off the coast of Oregon. It's not just a drought in California, by the way. They've declared a state of emergency in the state of Oregon, mostly in the southern eastern portion, but, a lot of people thought that Oregon would be, or still think, will be a safe place to go when man-made climate change kicks in, as they've been describing it. And there's a map of all the safe places that the UN has drawn out, whether it's accurate or not, showing the safe places and the unsafe places. And there's Portland, there's other places. And it shows basically like the idea of a safety net while the rest of the country is stricken with drought. But I want people to know that this part of Colorado that I'm in right now is not totally stricken by drought. And I'm very pleased to see, green vegetation. And I actually planted a bunch of seeds in a garden. You can go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Alex Ansary, and look for the video Guerrilla Gardening Fun. Just because the UN comes out with a map doesn't mean that they have a crystal ball, that that's actually how it's going to go down. Even if there is geoengineering, aka chemtrailing, and other forms of man-made tampering with the climate. But if we're going through major changes with magnetic north and the Earth's magnetic field, then I would expect out of control, unpredictable, massive changes in the climate and weather, and that would include more rain in parts of the planet where normally it's been stricken with drought. And so that is my hope for parts of Middle America that, for the most part, incrementally over the past couple of decades and more have been abandoned as we see more people on the west coast of the United States. So don't discount it from the realm of possibility that in these earth changes, climate change, whether you believe it's caused by man or caused by something else, and I do think that there's a bigger picture behind, obviously, what's causing climate change on the planet, I think a lot of things are up for change on planet Earth at this moment. The Washington State Governor, Jade Helm, has declared a state drought emergency in Washington. As I just said, Washington State Governor. He has declared a state of emergency, freeing up funds. There's always this weird thing about them declaring an emergency so they can free up funds. But so now we have Nevada, Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington, all states stricken with drought, and governors declaring this state of emergency. So a lot of things are happening really, really quickly. Moving on to Jade Helm 15. By now, a lot of people that watch the mainstream media have seen the mainstream media bring out Jade Helm over and over and over again to demonize people that are asking basic questions. There's video on the web of them arresting, detaining people that are saying they're sovereign citizens. There's video in Arizona of the National Guard practicing taking down people that are screaming for food and water. It's totally insane. And it's in your face. There's video of the Army training to take on Black Americans. There are hundreds of videos of drills from the last decade, since 9/11 and before 9/11, showing different government martial law responses to said disaster. And it wasn't too long ago they were doing drills to quarantine cities if the swine flu epidemic actually kicked off. And it wasn't until Obama passed that executive order that would basically give the federal government control over the freeways. It wasn't until that was passed that the whole swine flu scare went away, was dropped like a hot potato. They got what they wanted. They got another executive order to control the freeways, to control human travel in the United States in the event of a disaster that they declare. We've seen Bush build these up with his executive orders. We've seen Obama build these up with his executive orders. Both Republicans and Democrats long by now should have already had that light bulb going off above their head that Bush and Obama are controlled by the same whatever. It's clear. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to have common sense and realize that there are patterns here that we can track, prove, and quantify. And in this day and age and information with the internet, and there's no doubt, there's no question why they want to control the internet, it is not difficult to prove that these things are taking place. When you watch the video of troops with guns marching down a neighborhood, walking past school children, and the mainstream media comes out and basically tries to portray the people of Texas as being so backwater they can't be taken seriously. Like the people in Texas, Batsop County and elsewhere, with the people that went to these town halls, you see, dancing on a string, monkey, funny men like Jon Stewart poking fun at people asking healthy questions about basically a very serious, threatening exercise, where they have deemed states like Texas and Utah as hostile. And by the way, the government comes out and says, you know what? The American people, the people of Utah, Texas, why are you concerned about us doing this drill? It's not about you. It's about overseas operations. What don't you understand about that? Now, that alone is bizarre. Why would you put out your battle plans out there for the world to see as we see this ramp up towards World War III with China and Russia? How threatening. I mean, there are people that have looked at, the map of where they're going to be doing Jade Helm, and they've got repositioned it. It's like, it looks like a practice attack scenario for going after Iran. By the way, Jade Helm is going to be taking place this year in 2015 over the course of several months from the summer of 2015 to the fall of 2015. So naturally, people are going, is this preparations for a false flag event that's going to usher in martial law? Is it time to coincide with this predicted economic collapse of September 2015? And, you know, someone doesn't have to jump to very far conclusions or conspiracy theories to realize that something is very wrong. And at the very least, you have a massive psyops where the people of America are being conditioned to constantly having these drills going on around them. Not to mention these drills they've done in the schools where they're practicing with live fire, freaking out children. Men with guns working for the government, kicking the door into schools in a drill. I mean, that's hardcore trauma that is being directed at the children. So we have trauma being directed at the population. Jade Helm, media wants people to think like that things like Jade Helm are normal. Here's some news that I'm going to bring to you about Jade Helm. So they're doing it on private land. The government keeps saying, hey, it's on private land. Don't worry about it. According to a Texas mayor, down in Big Spring, ranchers that have massive amounts of land in Texas, they've been paid by the government to host Jade Helm. And how many of these ranchers are actually fronts for the government itself? But basically, you have people that are paid off. And there are some people that have land out there. There's reports that have been written about one particular rancher that does not want to see troops training, does not want to host troops on his property. It's like, isn't there something in the Bill of Rights about, you know, not having to harbor troops from the government on your property? So be aware, there's places out there where the government trains for urban warfare. They have their own cities they've built. And now we're seeing all this about Jade Helm coming out. And I haven't put it outside the realm of possibility that a lot of the information about Jade Helm is being deliberately put out there in the public eye to freak people out. I mean, when you're seeing troops or police or anyone for that matter, basically kidnapping people on the street in a downtown scene, you know, somewhere like Fort Lauderdale, Florida, you know, in a famous video from last month, the people with their hands on their head, they're being kidnapped by the government. And there's an increase in videos of some of these protests of the National Guard coming through and just plucking a wild one from the crowd. You know, there's something that feels very fishy and suspicious about those very videos, and I believe that they are more than likely staged. What do I mean by staged? You have actors in some situations where you film something and it's arranged for someone else to film it. You put it on YouTube and you have a giant population freaking out. It doesn't mean that it's not true. It doesn't mean there actually isn't a drill taking place. It doesn't mean that the government isn't acting in a threatening way. But the psyops is showing the threat itself because we have a society of weak-minded people that will look at what they're putting out and they will defecate in their pants, and that's the problem. We have people that are falling for the psyops, and this is a day and age of many. So as we look now at geopolitics, we've seen this build and build and build. And I'm on record since 2007, discussing the stage-managed World War III scenario between China, Russia, and the United States that could likely result in America being occupied by foreign troops. That's why they've been training foreign troops so long in this country, as well as just shooting out our troops all throughout the world instead of being here in this country. And as some say, defending the border, which is wide open. If there was this great threat of another Osama bin Laden directed terror attack against the United States, like September 11th, 2001, that card being played over and over and over, the official story, a complete fallacy, yet people still eat it up. The official story of ISIS doesn't even make sense to anybody, and there's quite a few people out there at publications, websites that have talked about the real origins of ISIS. And now there's debates. Well, which U.S. president created ISIS? Was it Bush or was it Obama? Because there's really very little doubt as to where ISIS actually came from and why it's out there prancing as this freak-out card right now. The justification for, an expansion of a police state, a commissioner in New York City saying that 450 police officers should be put on the special department just to fight ISIS. As I say, thousands of Americans are joining ISIS. So basically, Americans are being desensitized with absolute BS. And so the mainstream media is involved in some hardcore mind control. The cable network channels, CNN, Fox News, and people are actually watching this stuff in this day and age, and that bothers me. There are people actually falling for this because it's obviously a ruse. It's obviously a fallacy. It's obviously BS. And so there's a section of U.S. society that's under a spell right now. Meanwhile, there are people that have abandoned the ship of watching the mainstream media, and they don't want to know what's going on. And I warn against total ignorance. Don't lose yourself. Don't forget about being happy. Don't forget about your health. Don't forget about basic fundamentals. But don't allow yourself to be completely in the dark about what's going on. Because for the last couple of years, all this has been building. The U.S. has gone into greater and greater debt. We just saw the greatest bank robbery in the history of the United States in 2008 and 2009. The United States is not meant to pay back this money. All this U.S. aggression that you're reading about, that you're seeing, is all being done deliberately to destroy the United States. And it puts Americans at risk. If the American defenses came down, if the country's defenses came down, if there was a solar flare, if there was an EMP, horrible things would take place. I've talked about this for years. And instead of me being proven wrong, here we are in May 2015, reading headlines like this: China rebukes United States on South China Sea islands. So in this theater of war, you're seeing, and I believe we're seeing, and that's the case that I am presenting to you in this courtroom. Let you, the jury, decide. I think that we're seeing a lot of evidence of this coming world war for years. It is absolutely fabricated when you see the deep economic cooperation between China and the United States. When you know the United States set up China's financial markets in the 1990s. When you know about the connection between Clinton and the Communist Chinese, as well as the Bush family, every leading politician, president, the last several decades, there is this documented history of collusion with the Communist Chinese. So here we are in 2015 with these talks of war and rumors of war. Whatever's taking place or could take place is absolutely fabricated, especially when China's military technology came from the West itself, as well as many other countries like North Korea. And that's why I keep doing this show, and that's what I'm reporting on. And that's what I'm bringing light to. So in this theater of war, the tensions right now, the spotlight is on the South China Sea region, as China is starting to build a series of artificial islands, perhaps for military purposes, perhaps for a war with the United States. In the future, as obviously China's preparing for, they're going to outnumber nuclear submarines, the United States and nuclear submarines by the year 2020. They've been preparing for something, my friends, down the line. So I don't see that stuff happening tomorrow. It's building. And in this headline, U.S. deploys bombers to Australia as tensions with China grow. They've deployed B-1 strategic bombers. The move comes amid increasing Chinese concern over the United States military activities in the South China Sea. So the United States has been threatening Russia in Ukraine and in other countries. Russia obviously has been more aggressive, flying bombers over European nations, Western nations, and we're being conditioned to think that this is normal. And there's a huge chunk of the population that says, oh no, this is just more Cold War posturing. Everything's going to be fine. No need to worry. No need to question our reality. What's really going on? They're obviously partners economically. They're obviously have criminal enterprises where they share the spoils of war. All these superstate nations obviously are acting like giant mafias coming together at the hip, and yet all these weapons of war are being developed. and yet all these fabricated tensions have polluted our media. And so you have populations all over this world that are being led in this coordinated attempt to, and it's really on a metaphoric level, humanity at war with itself. It's a insane asylum situation where you have all these nations pointing missiles at each other, and young children playing these video games where they're in different World War III scenarios. And not to mention video games like Grand Theft Auto, where it's become normalized in our society for young boys and even young women and adults to play video games where prostitutes are killed and murdered and people laugh at it. And every time I look at the TV and other people are noticing how violent it's become and how warped pop culture's become, the music, the entertainment. And there's no accident for it. There is no accident at all for the level of distortion that you as well are seeing in the mainstream media at this time. They don't want people's focus on any of this, being able to connect the dots and see how they're preparing for a World War III scenario. They want you focused on Bruce Jenner and his sex change. Okay, they want you focused on Barack Obama and Bill Clinton now being friends on Twitter. They want you thinking about this particular football player and what happened to him. They want you fantasizing about being a Kardashian, dancing with the stars on your smartphone, waiting for another message from your boyfriend or your girlfriend. They want you only thinking about yourself and your next high, whether that be what you're buying, what you're eating, what you're smoking, or who you're doing. And I'll tell you, the selfish path is a road to nowhere. It's a road to sadness. It's a road to decay. There's an old famous quote, "We begin to die the moment we become silent about the things that matter." And I ask you, does that sound like the world that our world has become today? The Department of Defense worried as China launches new mystery satellite for years. I've reported on these Chinese satellites that have been launched into space, and there is video of Chinese satellites that have flown over the United States. 2009, they raised the Chinese flag at the White House. That was all a ritual. These rituals are just like when you see the president bowing before foreign leaders. That's all being done deliberately. The people of the world should be able to interpret what that means. There are certainly people in other countries that are able to interpret these things. Why is it that here in the West, why is it that so-called progressives have some sort of a block seeing what's actually taking place? And we have a battery issue in the RV. I will continue as I turn out a light here. We're about 2/3 of the way done with the show. So the Department of Defense is worried as China launches a new mystery satellite, even though the Department of Defense should know that China got all that technology from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from Germany, from Israel, from other Western nations, NATO nations. And by the way, I don't know if you saw that video with these NATO leaders singing "We Are the World, We Are the Children," appearing absolutely drunk, but hysterical footage that I did happen to catch on YouTube earlier this week. It's almost as if they are making a joke out of themselves, actually being peacemakers, as they clearly behave in a fairly intoxicated manner on stage before the world. It's like more cannon fodder for the nationalistic propaganda as RT and Press TV and CCTV, these foreign news networks captivate the minds of more and more Americans. I know that those websites report on quality information at the moment, but ultimately in the end, they'll serve as arms of the New World Order, of the propaganda machine as the U.S. comes crumbling down and the Eastern New World Order rises as people look towards the world. The allied nations of the East, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and others, to provide a sense of peace in the world. And I think that that is clearly a propaganda move. Very suspicious to see the world image, the image of the United States, to track it over the course of several decades. And to see, of course, the United States itself funding the enemies, giving the enemies technology, going into debt, deliberately engaging in reckless fiscal policies, and not doing a damn thing to bring the nation up economically, bring people together. The media owned by the banks, owned by these special interests, want war within our society. They want a civil war to weaken us before the world war. All that is clear to see. There is a headline also running that I saw in Global Research that I reposted to amtvmedia.com. U.S. planning a Gulf of Tonkin in South China Sea? Question mark. Looking at what's taking place in the South China Sea, looking at John Kerry going over to China recently this week and saying, you're not building on these islands over here. There's going to be consequences for that. Who's the United States to be going over into China's grill telling China what to do? So it's this type of BS, and the type of BS with Kerry advocating going into Syria and other things that's making Putin look like a superstar, where people will actually argue with me and argue with others and say, no, 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 Putin's against the New World Order. Yeah, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, China, Russia, yeah, they're outside the dollar system. Peace will come from them. No, war is coming from this coalition that's being built. And it is another classic problem, reaction, solution where I think the United States is actually being set up to take the fall from a much larger system of corruption. It is a global system of corruption. Russia is a corrupt government. China is a corrupt government. So are some of these other governments and countries throughout Europe, throughout the world. Venezuela, we see these police states throughout the world. It is not just a phenomena that we're seeing in the United States. I mean, we see brutal police brutality in India and also other social ills, people with drug problems. And the bath salt epidemic, for example, is not something limited to the United States. So people need to really look closer at the social engineering that we've seen on a planetary level and really ask the ultimate questions. What is really steering this? Why are we in this type of predicament? What do we have to learn from this? How can we change it? How can we contribute something positive to such a chaotic situation? So going back to the news, Ukraine and China signed a currency swap agreement worth $2.4 billion. So you look at Afghanistan. The United States was in Afghanistan and Iraq, but who gets an oil pipeline? China does. The United States does the dirty work. It's all being set up for the handoff to these foreign governments. Well, here we see the United States in Ukraine, arming Ukraine, and all this news and information about the United States versus Russia over Ukraine. And here we have the Ukrainian government, which is really a puppet of the U.S., signing a deal with China, which leads us to our next one. U.S. nuke deal with China raises concerns. And the article reads, it seems like a typical day for Obama. He taped an interview on trade and did a few other things. Not so typical was something that didn't appear on the public schedule. Notification to Congress that he intends to renew a nuclear cooperation agreement with China. The deal would allow Beijing to buy more U.S.-designed reactors and pursue a facility or the technology to reprocess plutonium from spent fuel. China would also be able to buy reactor coolant technology that experts say could be adapted to make its submarines quieter and harder to detect. No, I'm going to pause there. I just said a mouthful. So, tensions between the United States and China in the South China Sea. Gotcha. Kerry going over to China this week saying, China, better watch it. We in the West, we're cowboys. We're not going to allow you to continue to build your military base in your artificial ocean, okay? What are you going to do? But at the same time, you have this backdoor dealing where, I'll just go over it again, China would be able to buy reactor coolant technology that experts say could be adapted to make its submarines quieter and harder to detect. As we recall, the other headline about China being positioned to have more nuclear submarines than the United States by the year 2020. All this is really big stuff, folks, and for years I've been talking about the United States allowing China to buy amazing plots of land in the United States, huge chunks. There was that deal that almost went through that Governor Butch Otter of Idaho tried to broker in 2008 and 9 with the Chinese. China wanted to have their own self-sustaining city. And all these corporations, by the way, a lot of them are completely owned and controlled by the Communist Chinese Party. So we are seeing, again, the chest pounding. We're seeing the positions of war. We're seeing the deployments of troops. Okay, we're seeing troops do drills. We got some information about that. China and Russia in a joint Navy drill. And yet we see the United States making backdoor deals with these foreign governments, and for years giving these foreign governments the technology to actually be able to wage war against the United States and attack the United States. Missile technology, computer technology, and as mentioned earlier, setting up China's financial markets in the 1990s to begin with to even be in a position to compete with the United States. All these jobs that have been outsourced, all this is by design to bring America to its knees. You know, new poll, 59% of Russians see the United States as a threat. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has had to work his diplomatic best in a rare meeting with Russia's President Vladimir Putin Tuesday in Sochi. Relations between the governments are at their worst in 25 years. And so, years ago, I saw this coming, that at a certain point in time, the 2015-2016 period, the main focus would be civil unrest, protests, and as we moved into the next guard, if you will, the Republican taking of the House and Senate, not specifically Congress, but the presidency, a Republican president in the year 2016, all this being set up, and the drums of war, the war drums, banging ever so fierce, even more so as we move into the future. So pay very close attention to who's going to be the GOP nominee and the war rhetoric. And so people are talking about, oh, look at what China's doing. Look at what Russia's doing. We're seeing the war rhetoric increasing and increasing and increasing. And understand that Rand Paul, Freudian slip, Rand Paul and Ted Cruz have attracted a lot of people in the liberty and freedom movement. And there may be some things that you and I may agree on that, is being said by Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. Rand Paul is not his father. And I feel a great deception coming out of even those individuals. You know, when you have a corrupt government that's on record for years, setting up some of these foreign governments to be in a position to where they are now, and you're still playing into that theater of war, that paradigm worldview of us versus them, and you're not actually uncovering the actual embedded corruption that's there, it's suspicious. There is not a single candidate running for the presidency in 2016 that I believe is 100% legitimate. And anyone with any common sense should at this point be able to see that, should be able to see through the rhetoric. Another headline also posted to amtvmedia.com, China and Russia unite to stop Western dominance. China has dispatched a convoy of warships for its first ever naval exercises in the Mediterranean, together with a Russian flotilla. The drills demonstrate a strengthening bond between Moscow and Beijing, who, despite having no formal military alliance, see their combined might as a counterbalance to U.S. power. Both countries have been modernizing their armed forces, and while their equipment still lags behind top-end Western technology, experts say they're closing the gap. And it goes on to say the last president, the most recent president of China, came to power in 2012, vowing to dedicate his presidency to building the, quote, Chinese dream of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Part of that dream involves a major overhaul of China's 2.3 million man military, which is 3 times the size of Russia's, but which critics say has become bloated, corrupt, and unfit for battle. By the way, the Chinese stock market is absolutely exploding right now and showing that they're not too different than the Federal Reserve. They have removed this Chinese provision saying that they have to have a certain amount of money on reserve in order to loan out money. So it's like they're taking a cue from the Federal Reserve itself on its monetary policy. And another headline from Press TV, analyst, United States hiding its aggression on China and Russia through pressurizing its NATO allies to increase their military spending in a bid to remain united against Russia. So all these things and more are really important headlines to be aware of. To be aware of the backdoor deals, to be aware of the China-Russia massive naval drill, to be aware of Jade Helm, to be aware of the things being said even by Ben Carson, 2016 presidential candidate for the GOP, for the Republicans. U.S. attack on Russia is possible in the future if it needs to be done in order to protect the American people. He says, quote, if the interest and the existence and the safety of the people of the United States was at stake, and that was the only way to protect them, of course, I would do whatever was necessary. And so, you know, I've covered a lot of information there in this last hour that you have been with me. We've lost a little bit of lighting, and I'm going to go ahead and make some adjustments now as I wrap up here and prepare my conclusion. But all these things and more are taking place on the planet, and it's all being done deliberately, ultimately, to suppress human consciousness. So when people look for solutions, when you look for solutions, understand it's a much larger picture, and you are the solution. You are responsible for evolving your own consciousness and not succumbing to the illusions of separation or becoming afraid of what's going to happen to you and realizing what you're capable of. That doesn't mean that you have to be an activist. That doesn't mean that you have to be a talk show host. That doesn't mean that you actually have to say anything. But in your mind, in your consciousness, there are aspects of your life that is wholeheartedly holding up this system, literally holding up the throne like a slave in Rome. And what's important in our own lives is that we all, and I'm not perfect, I look as well. What do we need to change about ourselves? What do we need to understand about this situation? Because there is something about karma as well that we can learn from life itself and why certain things happen to people or certain countries. And we need to start thinking outside the box of just our own lifetimes and seeing multiple generations and think in terms of hundreds of years to thousands of years to see the patterns of humanity, the rise and fall of civilizations, to understand how some of the events taking place above affect us down here. How might our actions in our own lives be affecting reality itself? And sometimes it's just about asking the question. It's not always about having the answer, but being on the path, being on the journey itself. And the journey, my friends, is what this is all about. And the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. See, in this war on consciousness, they have overwhelmed people. They have overwhelmed people that even want to research and understand these topics. They have overwhelmed people into not being able to understand what they're capable of, how easy it is at times to declare our own freedom and escape enslavement. And in some cases, literally using our God-given abilities to fight off an attacker or come to someone else's aid, or to plant seeds in the ground that can feed us, or to get into a car and turn the ignition and drive somewhere else that will make us happier, or to grab a hammer and some nails and put together some wood and build something that can actually shelter us and protect us from the elements. See, what I don't do is use my platform here to control your mind or get you to be a part of my cult or get you to believe what I believe, or to put you into a weakened mindset to where you feel you're dependent on me. But I see other people engaging in this behavior, and I feel that it's wrong. The goal is for each and every one of us individually to empower ourselves. There is no need for a leader. Because I think that in some of these changes that we're going to experience, I believe a lot of you suspect this as well, we're going to see a massive decentralization. And if you see a massive collapse of governments, of power grid structures, for whatever cause or reason, there is far more responsibility needed from everyone in every village, in every city and community to do something for themselves, whatever that means. Whether it means feeding themselves, whether it means protecting themselves, protecting their neighborhoods, protecting their village, protecting their micronation or tribe. It's all going to be decentralized. It's all going to be back in our hands. And if there's a major event like a solar flare that disrupts the power grid, you would see a massive reset of civilization. And I would say a rebalancing of overall relationships and friendships between men and women. And I would say that we are far too divided than we should be. There are certain complications that we're normally going to have within a society, but the level of divides taking place right now within society, which is, you could see it in the country, you could see it in the city, but it's a little bit more obvious in the city. It makes you wonder where it's coming from when you see this creep up so fast on society, when you see the numbers of society believing what they're told and adopting such divide and conquer consciousness. So this is a time where a lot of things are taking place. There's a lot of different reasons why I have chosen to relocate from the Portland area. And I don't think that the end of the world's coming tomorrow. But when it comes to our entire world as we know it going through major changes, I think that these are years, these are days, these are years, these are weeks, these are months. This is a period of time in which, and a lot of people feel this way, it is challenging to be around other people that are wholeheartedly programmed by the system or by the matrix. Be they men, be they women. That includes situations, people we might work with at certain job sites, people we may date, people we may live with. There's a lot of reasons why I have gone my own way. There's a lot of reasons why I have left the Portland area. There's a lot of reasons why I am an independent individual. And regardless of the fact that I have left, as I wrap up the show here tonight, and thank you so much for watching on this May 19th, 2015 recording of Outside the Box edition 349, I feel a responsibility to communicate to you this information that I just communicated. These current events, and as I've talked about for many years, the current risks and challenges that I see coming to the Portland, Oregon area, because it is out of compassion that I sound the alarm and have sounded the alarm for so many years, even though I have suffered, you could say, persecution in some way on a social level, judgment. And it's only because I care, and I believe that there are people watching the show right now that can benefit from this information, that I do the things that I do. And that's why I'm going to be back next week. New updates on what's taking place geopolitically and throughout the world. If you are online, I want to direct you to my YouTube channel, where there's other videos that I've done over the years and other videos that I upload that you don't see on Access TV. And that is youtube.com/Alex Ansary. And with that, we are now out of time. Until next week, I'm Alex Ansary, reminding you the path to the ultimate truth and place of power still lies within.